This video is powered by the pros at Pascal Air Plumbing and Electric. Arkansas owned, Arkansas operated. GoPascal.com.
Our friend in Birmingham, Pat Smith, is radio on WJOX, joins us now. Pat, appreciate the time this morning. Who had a worse weekend, Alabama fans or New York Jet fans?
Oh, my goodness. I would have said Alabama fans till last night in the fourth play of the Monday Night Football game. But, yeah, it's been a rough weekend. You know, Auburn went out to California. They got a win, but they look putrid offensively. Alabama loses at home, something that just has not happened very often during Nick Saban. So, yeah, it's been kind of a weird weekend of football in the state of Alabama.
Saban hasn't lost a double-digit game at home since he was the LSU coach in 2003. That's how long it's been. That's, again, it is insane to me. I want to ask you, you mentioned some of the games in Alabama, some of the teams in Alabama. Looking at the SEC overall, based on what you've seen through 2 weeks, is the conference down this year?
Yes. I can answer that pretty quick. I mean, you've got, 9 matchups with Power 5 opponents in the SEC sitting there at 3-6, where you've got LSU, Texas A&M, and Alabama all losing to Power 5 opponents. No, I mean, that's just looking around the league, my initial reaction, knee buckle reaction after 2 weekends of football, I would say yes, Ty. I think the league is down. And it also goes back to the fact of the quarterback play. We all knew going into this year, outside of what you guys have in the state of Arkansas and a couple other places around the SEC, this was going to be a transition year from a quarterback standpoint. And obviously in our state, we knew with the transfer portal, that's what Auburn had to do to go get their starting quarterback. You had 3 or 4 guys compete for the starting position in Tuscaloosa during fall camp. So, yeah, I would say right now through 2 weeks, and a lot can change. It's a long season left. But as of right now, yeah, I think it's down, and I think it starts with quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I mean, quarterback issues, I'm sure, are one of the top topics on your show and your station. But I got to wonder about that Alabama defense right now, man. Give up 349 yards of passing to Quinn Ewers on Saturday, 105 on the ground. It's not terrible, but where's this Alabama defense in line with what we've come to know and expect from Nick Saban's teams?
Well, that's been the issue. You know, last year or the last couple of years, it was all about Pete Golding. You know, hey, you gotta get fired. You know, get him out of town. He ends up at Ole Miss with Lane Kiffin. You know, they went to Austin last year. Granted, I know that Quinn Ewers was injured in the first half, but they gave up almost 90-something yards less last year in Austin than what they did to Quinn Ewers in Texas on Saturday night. The biggest issue so far has been the last couple of years, you've had no push on the defensive front. Everything that was pressurized on the quarterback came from blitzes. And the other night, they literally had, I think they touched Quinn Ewers twice. I think that was the official Pro Football Focus stat. Twice, the defense, only 2 players, was able to actually put their hands on Quinn Ewers. No sacks, just those hurries, just the knockdowns. Meanwhile, Jalen Milroe was running for his life. So it's kind of the trench play to us watching the game and reporting on it. That was the biggest issue because this Alabama offensive line, which is one of the biggest in the history of college football, people were going to talk about how they were going to be a Joe Moore finalist, all this kind of stuff. They did not get a push. They had a good first quarter. They outrushed Texas 2-1 in the first quarter, and then they kind of abandoned it. And then once Milroe threw the interception, things changed. But to go back to your original thought, the defense, without putting any pressure on a quarterback, it doesn't matter what level that you're playing in. It could be Arkansas high school football. You don't put pressure on that quarterback, he's going to be able to sit back there and absolutely pick things apart. And Quinn Ewers, really good quarterback. Let's not forget he was a 5-star. It was just the fact that he was injured last year and couldn't finish it out. But he was already lighting Alabama up last year before he got injured. So he just came to Tuscaloosa and just sat back there and was able to pick the poison and throw downfield over the secondary that Nick Saban coaches. So, yeah, a lot of hand-wringing and a lot of question marks right now about what's going on with that defense.
Had 2 gigantic losses in the Southeastern Conference so far. We talk about Texas and Alabama tonight, LSU and Florida State. We were wondering yesterday, is this a year where the league, with a Georgia loss somewhere along the way, gets left out of the playoff? And is there any path to 2 SEC teams in the playoff this year with what's unfolded already? What's your thoughts on that?
My thoughts is no. I'm going to go back to the original question Ty asked about the league in general. I think the league is down. We actually had a couple callers yesterday because everyone still has hope. Everyone has seen this movie before. Only twice in the history of Nick Saban at Alabama has he had an undefeated season. So Alabama is used to at least stubbing their toe once in a year and putting yourself in a position. But I go back to what you asked about the defense. That is the biggest problem. Alabama, before basically they changed the way they recruited back in 2015, they had these big defensive linemen. They were slow. They were gap fillers. And then Hugh Freeze comes into Tuscaloosa. Ole Miss with their hurry-up offense. They take care of business. They upset Alabama a couple times. Then all of a sudden Nick Saban changes to leaner, meaner, faster defensive linemen. And since then, the defense may not have been as overpowering as it was when Kirby Smart was the defensive coordinator, but you could still rely on it. The last couple of years, they can't get off the field on third down. So whether it's Pete Golding or this year Kevin Steele, a lot of frustration by fans because they're still recruiting 5-stars. And the question is, why aren't these guys being developed to the level that they need to be? I mean, Will Anderson was a fantastic player, but we can all look at the numbers last year, and he did not have the numbers that everyone anticipated. Yeah, they dropped down. So, him and Dallas Turner were supposed to be, the bookends that caused havoc last year, and that just never materialized.
We're talking with Pat Smith here on the McLarty Daniel Hotline, where all guests join us. Again, 6 locations in Springdale and Bentonville. A good deal is never too far away. Pat, again, continue with the SEC stuff. Last year, it took 6 wins for the SEC West LSU. Could you see a scenario where it's 5 wins get you to Atlanta in the West this year?
I do, because based on what we've seen so far, I mean, LSU's got issues. Bama's got issues. I think that just opens the door. Texas A&M, what happened down in Miami, forget about, Petrino being the OC, talk about Durkin as the DC. They couldn't stop, a Miami team that looked feeble last year offensively. So, yeah, I think it's wide open. And I really do, because there are too many warts on the so-called upper echelon. When we left Nashville, everybody said, well, it's either going to be Bama or it's going to be LSU. Well, after the first couple of weeks, I think everybody can make a whole list of things that's wrong with LSU and a whole list of things that's wrong with Alabama. So to me, yes, Ty, I think this thing is going to be wide open in the SEC West, and you might end up getting a surprise team in Atlanta. The one thing that Georgia has going for it on the other side, and we talked about it in Nashville, is the fact that because their schedule is so pathetically weak, that they could sit there and they basically treat all these games like preseason games. And they can get the quarterback right. They can get the offensive line, the new young guys that they're putting on defense. They can get those things right by playing these practice games. Meanwhile, almost everybody else in the league, I mean, they've got some serious tests at the first part of the season. And, these teams got to be ready to go, way early than what Georgia does by, about midway through the season. So long answer to your question, but yes, I do think that the SEC West is open, and you could see a team that does not have the most stellar record that we've seen in the past. It's kind of ironic, the final year of division play in the SEC West that has been the best division since 1992 competitively, may be the weakest it's ever been.
Pat, on that subject, we've got 3 conference games this weekend. I think Georgia absolutely mauls South Carolina in Athens, but I'm a little more curious to what happens in Starkville when LSU heads in there, and then also in Gainesville when Tennessee heads to the Swamp. How do you see those 2 games shaking out, which as we get going in conference play in week 3?
I think it's dangerous for LSU. I really do, because there were things. I know Will Rogers is not. He did not go crazy over the weekend against Arizona, but one thing's for sure, LSU's got secondary issues, and that's kind of odd to be able to say that just because they clout that their DBU. They've got issues there, so can Will Rogers, which we've seen in the past, be able to light them up? I think that's a very interesting game. Meanwhile, I think Tennessee. I know it was Austin Peay last weekend. I don't really put a lot of stock in what we didn't see with them. I think this Florida program is literally on the ropes, and so to speak. I think Billy Napier's trying to get at least another year. I'm not saying they're going to fire him, But listen, talking to people down in the state of Florida, they're extremely concerned about the way in the progression of this program right now. So Tennessee goes in there. I think they take care of business. But Tennessee continues their march to coming to Bryant-Denny Stadium later in October. Then, of course, their big game at the end of the year against Georgia.
Tommy, they have not won in the Swamp in like 20 years. So we'll see.
I mean, if you don't do it now.
Yeah, what are you going to do? It's like, that's what we say about
exactly.
Arkansas.
Yeah, if you don't do it now.
Arkansas's never won in their Pat. So I've said if they can't beat them this year, they're never going to win at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium.
Yeah, so maybe Georgia can
point.
start it and Arkansas can finish it off.
Amen.
Hey, what's going on down on the Plains? Had a change at quarterback on the trip out to California. Hugh Freeze, I think, is quietly building a team that may not be a contender necessarily for the West, but Pat, I think a team that maybe could upset and still rechart or reshape how the West will line up at the end of the year.
No doubt, no question. We've been thoroughly impressed with what he's been able to do. The biggest question for us was not the quarterback situation, but the fact that they had 40 new guys on the roster. You know, how are these guys going to be able to mesh? You know, what are they going to be able to do? And listen, Coach Hugh Freeze, the one thing that I will give him credit, and obviously not covering him on a daily basis when he was at Ole Miss, I had respect from afar, but listening to him almost on a daily basis, he's an extremely honest coach. And I know you guys get that with Sam Pittman, but we obviously don't get that with Nick Saban or whoever has followed or been before Hugh Freeze at Auburn. But he was very open yesterday. He said, our offense was awful. We're going to have to relook at what we're doing offensively. Peyton Thorne didn't throw the ball well. He's like, I'm not being ugly towards my quarterback, but I'm just being honest with y'all, which is crazy. He's even let people watch practices and stuff. So, I mean, it's very odd the access that we've been given to this Auburn football program, but he is very slowly being able to repair those relationships in the state of Alabama when it comes to high school football. He's already flipped a Georgia 5-star to Auburn. He flipped an Alabama 5-star to Auburn. This guy is going to wreak havoc when it comes to recruiting in our part of the world in the SEC. And Auburn fans are extremely excited. But I do believe they're going to get this thing turned around from an offensive standpoint because Hugh Freeze is too good of an offensive play caller. They'll get it figured out. But, yeah, I think they will be a team that will beat one or two teams that people are like, oh, wow, I cannot believe that just happened. But that's him building this program to SEC caliber because Brian Harsin ran into the ground, and if Harsin would have stayed, it would have put Auburn back at least 5 years.
It just feels like one of those years where the Iron Bowl could be a wild one, and Auburn could certainly wreck any plans that Alabama may have at the end of the year. It just feels like one of those scenes setting up here.
Yeah, well, I will tell you this. I think based on the reaction yesterday on our fans on Twitter and our text line and everything in the world, I think Alabama would love to be able to get to the Iron Bowl and still be in the conversation because I'm telling you, covering this program as long as I've covered it, and especially during Nick Saban, you would have thought that Mike Shula was back being the head football coach at Alabama yesterday. It was almost like Nick Saban has forgotten and he has done nothing for this Alabama football program. So I think Alabama fans would love for the Iron Bowl to absolutely mean something. But right now, there's the confidence level is something that I have not seen since 2007.
It's good to hear there's no overreactions then. I'm glad they're all on level ground with level heads. I'm glad to hear that, Pat.
I thought that was just
well, one thing's for sure, guys. It helps pay my mortgage. So you know what? I'm okay with that.
Pat, last thing before we let you go, does Bama make a quarterback change these next couple weeks?
I tell you what, I think this weekend you're probably going to see a soft audition. I think Milroe is still going to be the guy supposedly on paper, number one, but I think Tyler Buckner is, let's just say, he's in the bullpen. He is ready for the call. He's ready to come out.
BetOnline is your number one source for all your betting needs. Get the latest odds, lines, and matchup reports for baseball, boxing, golf, and more. BetOnline continues to be the fastest and easiest way to place your wagers, including live betting and your favorite casino and card games available to play right from your phone. Head to the website or use your mobile device to sign up today and get in on the action. Remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet online, where the game starts.